Ready? Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart. Naught be all else to me, save that thou art. Thou art not by day or by night. Waking or sleeping, thy presence my life. Be thou my wisdom, and thou my true word. I ever with thee, and thou with me, Lord. Thou my great Father, I thy true Son. Thou in me dwelling, and I with thee one. Riches I need not, nor man's empty praise. Thou mine inheritance. Like that we just show our humanity. And we want to give grace to each other. So you'll do a fine job. On Ancient Man. I think it can be one of the most interesting reads of the books we've written, because it's going to deal with the United States, so it's going to be very close to home. Snakes and culture in the United States, and drawings and mounds and pyramids and strange things like rock art in the Southwest. But we have a bias. So inductively, we back up. Inductively, we start with our bias. We're going to derive consequence from an admitted or established premise. We're going to make the premise the case, and then show the consequence of that. The consequence of that is that there is a commonality all over the world from the Tower of Babel. And this is proof then, this is confirmation, should use the word confirmation instead, of the authority and the truth of Scripture. In inductive reason, we're using that inductive reason too. Our researchers have gone out and they're just collecting data. They're just to gather the data and then to arrive at opinions, from that data. The guys have taken hundreds and hundreds of pictures. I would like to see in the new book have lots of pictures because there is something that can be said simply through the mass and the weight of so many pictures that has an impact in the book. The principle of logical conclusion. Now this is the main principle that I throw at students, and one that I use perhaps more than any other principle, at least consciously. Remember I said that very few students of apologetics are going to have the ability to intellectually and mentally do the gymnastics that are necessary. If you start talking to someone and say, okay, here's where they are, here's my best approach, I'm going to use a little bit of the teleological, a little bit of the ontological, a little bit of the evidential, and then my approach to them. We aren't quite that up to speed, are we? And I'm not even sure that is the direction to go originally. But here is one that I use all the time. I think, to me, the reason that this is so effective is because, again, it is, I think, a solid way to appeal to a postmodern mind. We will try and show you in the next 10 days or so that, it's not that long, is it? That, and we have a few more days in the next week, too, that the staff has given me. We're going to try and show you that the postmodern mind is very much alien to our way of thinking. It is alien to the gospel. It's alien to objective logic and truth. So how do we approach them? And I, as I mentioned yesterday, believe a good way in rational thought to approach them is to listen to them and start with their view and project it to its final conclusion. Okay. Now in practice, human beings do this all the time. Okay. Let me illustrate this. The way we believe, there's a phrase that we have used during the year, the way we believe is how we live. It affects our behavior. In the Scriptures, the way a man thinks is how he believes. This is taught by Jesus when he speaks of the fact that things come out of the heart. It's not what goes into a man, Jesus said, when he's not talking about disease, he's talking about moral issues. It's not a dirty cup that makes you morally dirty on the inside. You may get sick from it if you don't wash your hands, etc. But that's not what Jesus was talking about. They were talking in the context of moral right and wrong. And so Jesus is saying it's not what's on your hands that makes you morally sick. It's your heart. It's what's coming out of your heart. Things that proceed from the heart of man. It was another way, or implied in that statement from Christ, was that of the old nature, the evilness of man. We are born in sin, okay? Which, of course, is the one, and you read this, Happy Pagan, you get the hint there that it is one thing that's not accepted by the world. They don't like to be told that they have a moral issue within themselves. They like to think this, one of the most common fallacies in the modern world, and the non-modern world, I mean, you go back, I don't care how far you go back, is the idea that we're basically good. Basically good. So, in this, what I'm doing here is trying to show you it's out of the heart. The Old Testament gives us the same concept. It's out of the heart of man. We start with the way we think. So, many years ago, I remember going to a home for counseling. There was a crisis in the home, and the woman was in the bedroom crying, and the husband was mad in the living room, and they wouldn't talk to each other. And they were very close friends. They were fellowship, not in church with us, but they were very close friends. And we used to go to their home quite a bit. On a Thursday night in the old days, we'd have supper together and then play some games together. We had a great time. And now they were in crisis. And what an illustration they give of this projecting a view, in an indirect way, projecting a view to its final conclusion. The wife was all upset because her kids were now grown and gone, mostly from the nest. And she was feeling worthless as a woman because she had tied so much of raising a family to being a woman and her value as a person. And God says, you cannot mock me. Galatians. Verse 6-7. God is not mocked. God is not mocked. You cannot mock him. Whatever a man puts in the ground, you put this verse in your notes if you're deeply principle. I should really attach this to this principle, because that's what that verse is really saying. God says he cannot be mocked. What puts in the ground, that what grows. Okay? If it grew right away, human beings maybe would notice this principle. But sometimes it takes a long time for this principle to start growing, this seed to start growing. Okay?
Which verse is it?
I believe it's Galatians chapter 6, verse 7. Somebody will check that for me.
Yeah, it's 6, 7, 6, 7.
Pardon?
You just shout it, 6, 7.
6, 7. Let's look at it again. God is not mocked. Who's saying this? Who wrote it?
Paul.
Who wrote it?
Paul.
Who wrote it?
The Holy Spirit.
Who gave it to Paul?
Spirit.
Spirit of God. It's God speaking, right? Okay, appreciate you saying it over and over. I want to make sure everybody gets it too. What does God say about himself? You cannot mock me. What does he mean you can't mock me? Come on. People mock him every day, don't they? Think about it. Aren't there people every day raising their fist to God and making fun of him? Then what did God mean you can't mock him? Somebody explain this to me. Look, the Bible says you can't mock God. Well, people are making fun of him today. What does it mean you can't mock him?
You can't get away with it.
You can't get away with it. You can't. Look, if you could say to God, let me illustrate this. If you would say to God, I don't need you to be fulfilled as a human being. I can get fulfilled another way. My job, my woman, my man, my children, my hobbies, alcohol, sex. God, I'm not going to listen to you. You say I should follow you. But I don't need you. I can be my own God, and I can fulfill myself. Even the statement, I can be my own God. Now, we don't say it that way. We say it this way. I can make my own decisions. What did Eve do? She refused the godness of God and decided to be her own God. How do we know that? Because she chose her own rational thought over what God said. She was tempted to do that. Are you with me? You following this logic? So, if it's possible, if a person can, let me put it this way, if a person can refuse and disavow God and wind up at the end of their life, and even beyond, with everything that they wanted on their, getting it from their own ability, then their life would mock God. God says, I'm the only God there is. I'm the only one that can give life. So if one human being lives their life in such a way that they're happy, you hear him talk about here, are they really happy? They think they are. But if a person can live his whole life and end his life and he's truly satisfied and happy, and then take the next step, even after he dies, he's totally happy, then their life would what? What would their life do? It would mock the existence of God. It would ridicule that truth about God. It would take God and say, there's someone else who is, come on, help me, someone else who is equal to you. Let me say it slowly. If a human being can erase God in his heart and mind, and in their own effort, humanism, say that they can be their own God, and in so doing, they're claiming, now watch this, don't be shy of this thought, in reality, they're really claiming that they're going to get the same things that God wants for them, or that God offers, but they can get it on their own. Supposing one human being out of billions of us are able to accomplish that. It's almost like an evolutionary probability, isn't it? Mathematical probability. And you can have people that would say logically, well, there's a pretty good possibility at least one person can do that. Oh, thank you. How did you know?
It's called text message.
Thank you, Jared. I'm spending perhaps too much time on this, but I'm going to spend enough on it so I have some personal response from you that I'm convinced you understand this very simple idea and yet very profound idea from the book of Galatians. If one human being was able to do this, you have just erased God permanently because you have shown that somebody else can be God equal to him. But that is what man is doing. That's the foolishness of saying there is no God. That's why it's foolish. Because there is only one God. Now, what is that? You take that thought that I just gave you from Galatians. Rest on that now. Sit on that. The foundation's there. Sit on that, this idea. To help a person understand what's happening in their life by taking their worldview or their thought. What do you believe? Well, that's what I believe. Okay? What if you project that to its final conclusion? Help them do that. What does it look like down the road? Hey, I don't need God. You're a religious person. Sin? I can handle sin. I can deal with things that I think might be wrong in my life. They don't bother me. Nothing bothers me. I don't, and you get that back. Say, okay, you think that that's true? I'd be interested and fascinating if you can really live that way. So, inform me sometime and help me out here. Because maybe, you're saying my view is wrong, so I want to listen to what you have to say. So what you're saying is there's never any time in your life when you are dealing with conscience. You never have to deal with your conscience. You don't ever feel empty? In your whole life you've never felt lonely? In your whole life you've never been bitter and not being able to stop it? You hate somebody and you're not able to change it? You still hate him? What am I saying? You got the results of sin in your life and you can't stop it. I'm curious. You're a self-proclaimed person that you can handle everything, and if they say to me, hey, God's your opiate, God is your drug, you need him to help you, I don't need that. Oh, you've never in your life once felt inadequate. And that's fascinating. I don't have to say to him, you dummy. Of course you do. I don't have to say that. All I have to do is open the question. I'm projecting his view to its final conclusion and saying, you're assuming, you're telling me that you're just as happy as can be? That's fascinating. Wow. every time you go to bed at night, there's never any gnawing questions? Like, is there something more? I'm amazed. I have those questions. I've had those questions. And I have found God is the answer for those things in my life. That's what he's saying in here. You start dealing, you know, there's one sentence where he says here, it's a very difficult thing to deal with a postmodern mind. He says that. And then he says in another sentence, but there are opportunities all around us. Why? Because the postmodern mind that says there is no such thing as absolute truth still keeps running into what?
Absolute truth.
Absolute truth. How so? His wife gets cancer.
Gonna die.
Pardon?
She's gonna die. She's gonna die.
She's going to die. That's absolute. He can't stop it. There is no healing for it. If everything's relative, there's got to be some answer for everything, right? His kid gets sick. Are you with me? He says there's opportunities every way around it because the real world in which they live, there are absolutes. And that gives us opportunity. In other words, attach your debate and argue with them to the reality of their lives. And I've done this with people. I say, you know, you may be rejecting what I'm saying now, but it's just fascinating. I believe there's sin, and I do things that are wrong, and I feel conscience, and it bothers me, and I can't get rid of that. There's nothing a human being can do, really, to ultimately dissolve the idea. Now, I know this is a fact. There's nothing a human being can do to really get rid of the guilt that comes from the Spirit of God's work. There's only one thing to do, and that is get forgiveness. All I do is deposit that with Him, present that to Him, position that for Him. And I know there's a possibility that maybe a week from now, years from now, or 10 years from now, He'll be laying there ready to go to sleep, and internally, here's this conscience, here's this thing happening on the inside. Maybe God drawing him. Okay? And then maybe he'll remember, what did he say to me? And then you have another opportunity to share. I really emphasize this, the principle of logical conclusion, POLC. Flaws can most often be seen clearly. Now, I think in the fall I used the projector as an illustration for you, didn't I, and slides? Okay? In the old days there was film, no digital, not digital at all. That's the world they grew up in. And so you either took prints or slides, slide film, and we have hundreds of slides, Bev and I, of our marriage, early days with our kids. And then I found you could go to the supermarket or somewhere and blow them up, you know, 3,200 dots per inch, and the clarity is incredible. And I was amazed because I had slides that were poorly taken, and I'd have a picture of Beverly on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial on our honeymoon, and here's the Lincoln Memorial, and there's Beverly, and it's so silly because I can go there anytime and take a picture of the Lincoln Memorial, but not my wife. And then I took them to, and they blew it up. Well, what they did is they simply digitized the slide. 3,200 dots per inch, that's pretty high resolution in those days, you know, 10, 15 years ago. And then to my amazement, I could zoom in and make Beverly this big. Lincoln Memorial disappears. Now I have a beautiful picture of a beautiful woman. And it's one of my favorite pictures. She's gorgeous, still is, and there she is. Because I could blow it up. But in the process of using slides, sometimes, this is a neat slide. I'll hold it up to the light bulb. Wow, I'm going to blow this one. I'm going to have so I can zoom in. So the principle of zooming in really is neat. And then I found to my amazement that sometimes I put it on the screen. And there's this big blotch over here. Here's a big mark. Remember I told you this? So I know that by deduction, I know that there is, or induction perhaps, I know that there is a problem somewhere. There's either a spot on the projector lens, right? Or there's a spot on the screen. That's possible. I put another slide in if the mark is the same place, and I know it's on the screen. If it's on the lens and put another slide in at the same place, then I know it's on the. But if I put another slide in and the mark isn't there, then I know what. The slide has a spot in it. And to the naked eye, not that important. Blow it up, ruins the picture. You take a person's view, you help them present it to them to see the context of what does it look like when you blow it up. Its flaws can more easily be seen when we project thought to its final application or conclusion. And this isn't just valuable for unsaved people. It's valuable for you. Do you overeat? Do you eat the wrong foods? Do you eat too much grease and fat and cheeseburgers? Well, it's hard to be at a college and not eat stuff like that because everybody eats the same meal, isn't it? It's pretty tough. Okay? Do you not get exercise? See, how do you take care of your body? Right now, well, you're young and don't have to worry about it. Did it ever dawn on anybody that some of the problems that come later in life start when you are... No, it doesn't dawn on youth because you don't use this principle. You're not using this principle. They did research on cadavers coming back from Vietnam. And they found, to everyone's amazement, that heart disease already was taking a hold in the hearts of 18 and 19-year-old men who were killed in Vietnam. Well, when did heart attacks come? If you have a heart attack at 40, that's early. 50 and 60, yeah, we expect it. But when does it start? Ooh, the projected view to its final conclusion. What is your view? You're immortal. You can do anything you want. You can jump on a crazy bridge with bungee cords, and you can do all kinds of daring things. Right? Ankles. Right, Nathan? This is true. And the older you get, it starts sinking in. Can't do that anymore. I remember the night, I remember when Scott he loves volleyball. He was powerful, strong body. And he spiked the ball so hard, pulled the muscle off of the bone. Big bunched up muscle. Pulled it right off the bone. Then a couple years later, he has another problem. Jared's a great baseball player, but now he comes back sore more than he ever was before. What's happening? Older. Okay. What are you doing now in habit patterns that don't look like they're doing anything to you right now? People who smoke. What are they missing? POLC. If you could project that view to its final conclusion. Well, maybe I should. They're doing a thing at the high school this next week. Somebody just told me this. I think Mike Moyer or somebody, they just told me this. They're doing a special thing on accidents and drinking and stuff, and they're going to show young people actual scenarios, crash scenes and stuff. Why are they doing that? They're trying to scare the kids, aren't they? Certainly they're trying to scare the kids. What principle?
Project views of
Yep.
conclusion.
They're trying to show them what the conclusion is of this kind of a lifestyle. Do you like this? Do you like that? No. Oh, no, I don't like that. Well, where does it start? I'm doing it right now. Okay. Effective, common. Spend a little too much time on it. We got to keep going. We got reports to do in a movie too, though. Principle of sufficient reason, POSR. Maybe do two of them today because they're a little going to grasp these. Principle of sufficient reason. POSR. There is a sufficient reason for everything, either in another or in itself. Okay? You might have a hint here. There is a sufficient reason for everything, either in another or in itself. This principle is the ground of all true propositions. This is as critical in logic as the law of non-contradiction, which we'll maybe look at tomorrow. Okay, principle of sufficient reason. The teleological argument, I'll go back to this, you can write it out. The teleological argument is, in fact, in part reliant on the principle of sufficient reason. Okay? The teleological argument. The idea of God. In the beginning, God. Am I right on this teleological? I think I am. You would find the same true in the ontological. The very thought about God is proof that there is such a God. In Acts, for in him we live and move and exist, Paul says. And even some of your own poets have said, for we are also his offspring. All things come into being by him, and apart from him nothing came into being that has come into being. In other words, there's a sufficient reason for everything. The world around us had to have a causer, an orderer, someone who brought it about. Now the argument of evolution is, and the principle of POSR, is that it's sufficient within itself.